Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Valencia Ray is a medical doctor and functional medicine physician. She helps busy women overcome stress and burnout and stop annoying symptoms without scary drugs. She helps them to do things like lose weight, experience greater vitality, connection, and confidence. Her life's calling has been about assisting women on the journey of healing stress and burnout while building overall health through the integration of body, mind, and spirit, beginning with herself. Well, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. I'm honored to make the connection again. It's been years since I've seen you face to face.
Yes, so much synchronicity. It's really amazing that our paths have crossed again like this.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I was hoping you could start us off by letting us know a little bit about how you got into the work you're doing and what drives your passion for it.
Okay, yes. So I'm a conventionally trained physician originally. For over a couple decades, I was actually an eye surgeon, a cornea transplant surgeon, and all of that. And in getting there, of course, I had studied and went through and was trained in internal medicine and et cetera. And that's what I did my internship in. But the also great thing that connects what I was doing as the eye surgeon to what I do now as a functional medicine doctor, which I'll mention in just a moment, is we saw so much chronic disease. We were like a primary doctor in many ways for chronic disease problems, like everything from autoimmune, prediabetes, digestive issues like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and all of these things would affect the eye. And that's how it came to me. Or people would show up thinking something was wrong with their eye, and I'd find out they had all these underlying conditions. So fast forward, and the reason why I decided to listen to what I feel is and know is a calling for me to move on to where I am now is it also aligned with something I had in my heart as a young child around empowerment of mind and body and spirit, even before I really knew what that meant. But I took a leap of faith, sold the practice, and I've been on this journey that ultimately it was a convoluted journey. It took me through neuroscience and the brain and cognitive neuroscience and how to help people to what I call take back the steering wheel of their mind and develop greater emotional resilience. But ultimately, I finally found functional medicine, which has been around for well over 30 years to my surprise, because I didn't know what it was at first. I just learned quickly that, wow, this is actually why I even went to medical school in the first place, in that it allowed me to help people empower their own health and to actually get to the root causes of mental, emotional, and physical conditions, diseases, however you would like to term it. And it also allowed me to bring in my passion for bringing in more spiritual awareness, because that's our forgotten superpower, I like to say, in that we have forgotten that inner part of us that really even relates to our mental, emotional, and physical health, and bring all four together into what I call mind-body integrative medicine. So I moved from Chicago, where I knew you years ago, and in the business group, and relocated out here to Northern California. And in this context, what I do now is bring all of the conventional medical experience, the personal journey through all of that, everything from helping people with their self-awareness and confidence around leadership coaching to how this connection between stress is connected to 90 to 95% of chronic disease, including mental and anxiety and depression and all of these things, and to help busy women to overcome the stress, fatigue, hormonal problems, and to lose weight that stays off by going through this doorway of stress and understanding it is not just about, oh, my job is stressing me out, but to understand how they can, even with this whole body approach, this whole four parts of us approach, get to the root of why that stress is causing the prediabetes or causing or contributing to, certainly. It's not just about how much sugar you eat. The stress can throw off your adrenal system, which throws off the prediabetes or the high blood pressure, et cetera. And when you start to connect that dot, it stops being this piecemeal situation and it becomes more of this holistic health, how your gut is affecting your brain and anxiety, and what you can do to not only calm your perception that's causing the stress, but educate yourself around food as medicine so that you can actually understand what's going on with the gut that is causing the anxiety and not just go get a pill for anxiety. So that's what I'm doing. I finally found all the pieces to this holistic approach, literally.
And you mentioned that you were doing a lot of work with women and professional women. Can you talk more about how you got into that?
Yes. Well, I'm my avatar, one thing. So I've been a busy woman all my life. I was in as growing up as a child, I was actually more artistic and playful and loved people. And yeah, I did hold a lot of leadership roles as a child in that, phase of my life. But then I really went through this phase of really wanting to understand why, in spite of my academic achievements and performance, why was there always this uneasiness that, something's wrong with me, or the stories and the anxiety that were running my brain, not realizing there was some root causes even at a genetic tendency level, meaning your genes are not your destiny, but if you have certain what's called SNPs, SNPs, which stands for single nucleotide polymorphisms, then that's a big way of just saying that you have one amino acid that might be a little different than what the wild type is. And so therefore you're more susceptible to the epigenetic factors, meaning here's what epigenetic means: the outside influences of nature and nurture dancing together. So how you eat, how you sleep, how you, et cetera, can make you more have of a tendency to throw off your genes and lead you down the road of, anxiety or rumination. And all of these things are literally connected there, or how you throwing off your gut. So ultimately, this started with me at a young age, like, what is causing this? I don't have any reason to feel like this. I'm doing well. Why am I so always whatever? So then ultimately, after a somewhat turbulent teenagehood personally at the family level, I, somewhere in there, just in my dreams, actually, and just in my knowing, I took a U-turn, and instead of going into business and being an entrepreneur, which is what I thought, I found myself landing in medical school at barely age of 21. And like, how did I get here? Well, I go through that. I graduate barely 25. And I really became this hyper uber focused achiever. It was unconsciously, I can look back, it was like I was proving I could do this because I didn't have a lot of external support. I didn't know any other doctors. And, my family was more into business or architecture, et cetera. And, I didn't feel the support, partially because that was the way my paradigm was as well. Like, I saw the world through a scarcity lens almost, through my fears. And I can look back in hindsight. So even support that might have been there, I wasn't really acknowledging it. But what that did was drive my fight, flight, freeze response. And I became very hypervigilant, perfectionistic, just doing too much. I didn't need to finish college in 3 years. I just put all that on my plate and pressured myself. And then ultimately, I did come back around full circle. And right out of my cornea fellowship, my cornea transplant fellowship, I took a full-time job. And within that year, immediately started making plans to open a business and start my own practice. Well, in that year that I'm working full-time and deciding to start my own practice, believe it or not, I thought, why don't I just start a family too? And I can look back and say, oh, what was I thinking? But, my husband tried to warn me, and I put that on the plate. And that was 1991. And that was the year of like the most horrendous emotional experience of my life. that why I even have such an awareness of mental health is what happened that year. In that that was January. I made all these decisions. I did end up getting pregnant. I'm single-handedly juggling all this, working my full-time job. And by August of that year, I had a 4.5-month miscarriage. It was very traumatic. My dad had suddenly become ill right behind that or during that year. And he started really going down and we didn't really know what was going on. And so he passed away right behind the miscarriage within a couple of months. And I was so driven with my lack of awareness and this stress drivenness that, believe it or not, the day after he was buried, and I really was devastated. I mean, I was almost like not even grounded enough to function at his passing, but I crushed down the emotion. I plowed through. My practice had just opened, literally. And I had, all this debt, no patients, 2 full-time employees. And I literally got on the plane after his burial the next day and went from Chicago to San Francisco to take the oral section of my surgery boards for ophthalmology, which it boggles my mind that I put myself through that much pressure. Well, needless to say, after that, I came back and still didn't take. I went back to the office and the job on Monday. Within a week or two, I was so depressed and so, oh my God, I'm not going to make it, that I literally will never forget ever. I sat on the side of the bed and I said a simple prayer, which was, God, if you don't help me, I'm going down. And so, Tim, I actually understand now why people kill themselves. I was so pressured. I wasn't eating right, wasn't sleeping right. Lost my father, had a second trimester miscarriage. And in that moment when I said that, I can still see, I know the house we were in, the bedroom, I'm sitting on the side of the bed. My poor husband, I had already told him there's nothing he could do to help me. He was really worried. I just heard this still small voice whisper inside to me, and it said, don't worry, Valencia, you're going to make it. And that was the turning point in my life. It wasn't like presto change overnight. It was faith, but I had this sense of peace that I could make it. And the will to go forward did come pretty quick, and it was an act of faith and it grew me spiritually, and I've never looked back. I've never taken my foot off that path of my spiritual growth. I'm so grateful. And the way it turned out is magical. I mean, I made it through that. By 6 months later, was able to work part-time, and people were coming. And ultimately, I had another, a girl and a boy. And through that journey, while being the ophthalmologist, a surgeon, and I was able to let go of the job and have this big practice. Through those years, I came to understand the mind better and stress. My hobby was studying the mind. What happened to me? How did this happen? And learning to let go, learning to sleep was important, learning all these things as I made the time to get the help to have more personal time with the children, and et cetera. So all of that ultimately led me, the busy woman who was always interested in leadership anyway, to combine this business leadership ultimately with the stress. And then I needed to take it to this other level. And that was where I started having what I feel was that same small voice leading me to sell the practice and go to this new thing, which honestly was more difficult.
And the new thing was the functional medicine training.
The functional medicine, and the journey between that was working as when I met you. Remember, I was doing like leadership coaching, right, et cetera, because I didn't know about the medical piece. I experimented with, Ayurveda, or is it Chinese medicine? But none of that was like, that's not what I'm to do. I don't know where the medical piece comes in. But I can look back, and this is why I've come to be part of my spiritual journey of learning how to let go and surrender and trust. And, I was a Bible teacher along the way. And then I ended up in another arena where I'm not so much as a particular religion at this point. I'm more of a cosmic spiritual consciousness. And for me, I call it Christ consciousness, within. But it all worked together, even though I'm on this convoluted journey. If I wasn't so clear in my knowing and purpose, I would have run back to ophthalmology screaming, because it did not go as planned. The first part of my life was so linear. Boom, boom, boom. I'm in 21. I'm out almost 25. This was like all over the place. And what was the core theme was this desire to understand the mind, and to understand why is there so much fear, and where does that come from, and why do we tend to put ourselves down, and where does that come from, and this conditioning pieces. And so through those years in connecting how our environment was getting so volatile and uncertain, and how that played in leadership and how that played in emotional resiliency, I was actually learning all of that in much deeper detail, and working on my own lack of self-awareness around certain things, so that when I did finally stumble into functional medicine 10 years after that point, I was ready with all of the mental, emotional pieces. And then a functional medicine filled in this whole empowerment piece, because the neuroscience for the gut-brain connection really didn't even come out well until 2017. So I was so far ahead of looking for this thing. The science-based wasn't even there like it is now. And so I've watched it really expand and grow quite a bit, even since I've been in it, in terms of the science and the research and the access, and the outcomes of my patients and clients is mind-boggling to me. I took a year, even in the beginning, to say, does this stuff really work? Because I was skeptical about it. And it's been profound, from a mental reversing of everything from, a couple of my clients had scary mental stuff going on that I was able to reverse, and they have moved on. And then there was the whole obesity and hormonal issues. I had issues in myself I couldn't get to the root cause of, even though I've been a doctor this long. Everything kept being normal, and I knew it wasn't normal. But once I got into functional medicine and could do the functional medicine testing, then I was like, oh boy, it sure is normal. And I took care of it, and helped my husband finally get rid of the extra 50 pounds that he had accumulated through the conventional system that wasn't helping him at all. And also to deal with the underlying issues that was causing it, because he wasn't overeating. I live with him. We've been married 32 years. So at the end of the day, he is in great health and has maintained his weight because he doesn't diet. We just fixed his metabolism, helped him to understand some things about what he was doing to self-sabotage.
Wonderful. Well, I know you have a series of stories from people that have had reversals in physical chronic illness and in the mental health field. What are some of the key stories you want to share with us?
Okay, so since you are linked with mental health, I'll give you two short dramatic stories. And I'll summarize that the physical is everything from, again, weight loss that stays off, reversing menopausal symptoms that have been struggled with for years, or autoimmune problems related to thyroid, that people are told that your thyroid is fine, and certain things aren't checked. So you check them and you realize, no, they're not fine. And you have them fix it. And that is really important. And then the gut and autoimmune, how that's connected, brain fog is connected to all this. So the whole sleep piece, the results, you can see that right on the website, to your point. But the stories, because of the mental health, I'll connect to briefly, is my probably second or third patient. Actually, I didn't even think I was supposed to be the person to work with this person. I'm licensed in Illinois, and I'm licensed in California. And I was doing telehealth before it became accepted as widely as it is, because I've been good at technology since I sold my ophthalmology practice and went down this entrepreneurial path. I started using Zoom in 2011 when I think the company was created. So since I'm fully licensed and I'm not a primary care doctor, people have to have their own primary care doctor. I'm more of a consultant, doctor. Then my son, who was an athlete all through college, he played basketball from the time he was, I think second grade is when it started. And as he got into the traveling basketball, I'm from Naperville, or at least we lived there 20 years, and all of this was going on at that time. He needed extra coaches. He had a primary coach and secondary. Well, the secondary coach at that time, we would stand on the sidelines. My son was only in fifth grade, and we would talk about neuroscience. I had, in those years, I eventually sold the practice. I don't think I had sold it yet, because I started talking about neuroscience even before I got sold the practice. We would stand there and talk about it, and I would tell them all these interesting things about cognitive neuroscience and mindfulness and all this. This was probably about 2005. Yeah, so I was still in my ophthalmology practice. All right, so my son grows on, and fast forward now is 2019. It's at the it's 29, the very last week or two of 2018 going into 2019, and out the blue. So now this is what a good almost 15 years later, 14, I get an email from this coach, and make a long story short, I was like, wow, this is interesting. And he said he threw up a Hail Mary. He was in the area, he was in Naperville. He remembered our conversations on the sideline. And there was this issue around his son, long story short, and his son had some, he did not understand why it was going on, but for 2.5 years, he was struggling with some mental stuff, and had been in the medical system. And to make a long story short, it wasn't working. And so he said he reached out to me. And so after some mind stretching on my part, because I was like, I can't help him, like, why is he contacting me? And at the end of the day, I had started studying nutrition genomics right before he had contacted me. And I started, that inner voice again was like, nope, you help him. And with the doctors in place, of course, the psych guys were still there, and I had talked to them and all this, because I wasn't going to manage him, obviously. Then I did some nutrition genomics testing and found out he had some certain gene issues. And literally, it took only 2 months to reverse his situation that he'd been struggling for 2.5 years. He couldn't even work. And his father just sent a note letting me know that, wow, he's doing still great. What's this, 21, almost 22? He's been promoted a few times. Even while we were working together and doing the visioning and doing the planning, he reached his goals for the next few months, which I won't go into detail about, but he literally reached it. He literally got that job. He literally got that goal that he wanted to do, and has not looked back, because he understands now. He understands some lifestyle things. He understands some self-care. He understands what he shouldn't be eating and taking. And he understands certain supplements that can help him to keep on track. He's good. So that's one. And then the second one, real quickly, was another mental one, where the son of a friend who is my age, essentially for going on 2 years again, went from being an A student, tech person, going off to college, and then having this, like, I couldn't even function well. And make a long story short, he had been through the system, and he had certain really strong conventional therapies going on. And ultimately, as I'm doing the functional medicine testing, and as I'm really assessing the big picture, I just knew there was probably mold. Tested it, and off the chart, that's what it was. Okay, so mold will cause mental inflammation and other things, neuroinflammation and other things. And so what happened at that point was doing the functional medicine. The food is medicine. It affected the gut in certain ways. I had all of that information, and we could do the treatment. And also there were some other modalities that were involved. But ultimately, he's back online in college now. And locally, we were able to find someone to take the ball going forward so that he could go and see, locally. But I got him to the point working together where he was back into socializing. He was back online in college. And at the end of the day, that is just so gratifying, of course, because you're saving people's lives when you're able to intervene like this. And so those are just two examples. Like my main primary focus isn't so much as mental health. Like I align with, work with other therapists who I might refer to depending on what the person's looking for. But it can be this collaboration where you're also looking at it from a gene, from a food, because food itself, the processed foods, foods with a lot of chemicals and things in it. Like if it looks like it's something that it's not, then it's processed. So if you know that and you can start to re-educate yourself, then you can you're more empowered to take control of your own health. And so I'm working more around helping people understand that stress, instead of trying to find a thyroid doctor and then try to find a brain fog doctor and then try to find a prediabetes doctor. If you have someone, and that's what makes me different, that I understand this umbrella of stress and the 4 key stressors and how they're branching off, causing mental, emotional, glycemic, and adrenal, and inflammation and circadian sleep, how they are all like this, then you can actually cut to the chase and not, okay, I fixed my thyroid, but I didn't learn anything really much about this other area, prediabetes stuff. And so now ultimately you mess with that too much, it's going to throw off your thyroid again. So that's the
well, and that's the thing is so many people who end up in integrative and functional medicine approaches were in the conventional medical approach that chases down symptoms and tries to squash them. And they end up chasing around in circles until they were told, well, there's nothing we can do for you. And that's how they end up in a system like the functional medicine, which looks at the overview. And as you've already discovered, for a lot of people, that provides options that they simply can't access through conventional medicine. So right. I'm thrilled that you found that. And I remember back when we were doing the engaging speakers work and you were doing coaching, and I'm thrilled to hear that you're doing the coaching with this work. So you're integrating even more than just functional medicine, but also, as you say, the spiritual and the intellectual and the emotional and the physical. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Just one thing. And so I just did a leadership, I was at a breakout session for a leadership conference for women, and they wanted me to do a mindfulness session. And I was like, sure. So I titled it like 3 tips for mindfulness for business success. And here's another dot connection. Mindfulness is just the beginning. It's a way of helping the runaway left brain to start to focus, but it still leaves out emotional piece as well. And so what I did was focus on how does mindfulness tie into mental agility and emotional resilience? Left brain, right brain, mind, heart. And I will say that if we're just thinking mindfulness is the magic wand for now being able to elevate your self-awareness, but we leave out this conversation of how to, what I call, make friends with feelings, which is a right brain, deeper connection to the heart, then we still can be easily jacked around by the fear button being pressed. And you want to talk about scattering your mental agility, that'll do it if you don't know how to take back that steering wheel. So my interest in leadership coaching and wellness is still under this umbrella of stress because, leaders are stressed out. And so there is this dynamic of, the whole journey I told you where I'm this overachiever. You get clear about your purpose and the role you're going to play. You get clear about your self-talk, about yourself, all of these things using mindfulness is just the first step, and there's other steps you should know about. But the goal is ultimately what? Mental agility and emotional resilience, which, by the way, not only will, accelerate your leadership capacity. How many leaders could use mental agility and emotional resilience? But it will also affect your physical health. And that's where, again, the dot needs to be connected, that this is a whole body, not just run over here for your brain fog, run over there for your weight loss.
Excellent. So what's an aspect of your work that we haven't even touched on yet? You want to make sure we get in here and make sure that we let people know how to reach out to you, how to connect with you.
Yes. So what we've mostly been speaking of is a medical, the medical pieces that I've been doing and testing out and seeing how amazing it is. And that has been limited to, to Illinois and California. And it is about getting functional medicine personalized, either one-on-one, or I am going to be opening to a certain areas of grouping for like a group medical with 6 to 8 people. It's a little different structure, but it's focused on putting together still umbrellas of stress goes over both of it, but there is more, maybe one focus on hormonal and one is on maybe pre-diabetes weight loss. So that's going to be medical, but I know there's millions of people in the world and we have a crisis, when it comes to our health and well-being, and it seems to be getting worse, not better. I've been in this field this was my 40th year from starting medical school, and I've watched things do this direction instead of this for the most part. So in 2022, I'm also going to have more of a coaching educational platform, because that will still move the needle enough where if you need more personalized, because you're so advanced with your condition and you need more of a deeper dive, you can always still come through the medical door. But this other area is more of a educational, health, wellness, metabolic reset that still will move the needle on these issues. But then there's also an area that I call facet healing as a sub-program to my bigger signature wellness. And that has to do with understanding the parts of ourselves that we tend to shove in the closet and deny. That is really like that. Like if you can imagine, there is a diamond, and I like this kind of, shaped diamond like that, that if that diamond was the divine source, instead of us, when we realize we are part of this diamond, instead of being like these individuals who are separated and isolated, from each other, when we realize that we are individual, sovereign bodied beings, but we really are sourced from this one source and our facets on this macrocosm, the light is already there within us. It just tends to be covered over by these, the facet of that big diamond. If we are the facets, that light isn't shining all through us because we have these stories going on. And that's that whole part I mentioned way in the beginning. I'm not good enough. I'm not something. And it's mostly conditioned. It's like, think about it. You're in kindergarten, now you're competing instead of cooperating. And it's all based on a standard that may not even be your genius. Maybe your genius is art and music, which has been taken out of the system for the most part. And what we don't realize when we do that, we're even hurting the math and science side of your brain. Einstein talked about that it's a back and forth, and your genius and ideals come through, and then the left brain can take it and put it into shape and form. Well, if you take that away, then this left side, which does not have good access to the imagination, to emotion, in fact, it tends to be like afraid of feelings, like, because you can't make sense of it. You can't like linearly write it out here. Then that creates a state of potential separation and isolation, because the left brain does think like it's it's the focus. It's the focus. It's the this is me. This is you. It's the separation side of our brain. It's not bad. It's important. You don't try to get rid of your ego. It's built into your left brain. It just allows you to be your unique human expression. But we need this right side that connects us more to our heart and the spirit and the emotion. And what's stopping us? What's stopping us is that we need, as we realize how to retrain the brain to be more embracing of the whole self. I mean, all mammals have emotions, even your dog. I'm just saying we have these emotions. And instead of vilifying them and making them bad and wrong, or acting like, oh, we have it all perfectly together, instead of being vulnerable, doesn't mean you're less than, doesn't mean vulnerability, doesn't mean you share your personal everything. It just means you're willing to say, okay, I have this part of me, because we talk like that anyway. I have a part of me that feels X, Y, Z. I have a part. It's the internal family systems, Timothy, right? So the internal family systems therapy, I did get certified in that in 2019, actually. But I have a little different slant on it too. That's what I used unconsciously before I knew it was a therapy, to clear out some of my self-talk and et cetera that was causing anxiety and stress and couldn't sleep at night. So I take pieces of that, and I take pieces of something called the Gene Keys, which actually is an assessment map that can help people to really target in on certain things. And again, I meet people where they are, but in this particular area, I am going to be more, on the front end of, here's some new ways to accelerate your emotional resilience and et cetera.
And that's what you're calling the facet work?
Well, that is the facet healing work, but the actual business or the actual coaching program is well, whole, and wise. Well, whole, and wise.
And that's something you're going to be launching in 2022?
Yeah, it's already in the works. But in 2022, this entity will hold this educational wellness container, and the facet healing is a program under that. And so the tagline to facet healing is "Be you magnificently," and it goes back to the diamond, in that the macrocosm is the source that we're all interconnected to, and this light and love source. And then on a microcosm level, it's like we are our own diamond with our own facets or parts of ourselves, and that we have that inner light. You can call it, the most neutral term I would use is the essence self. You can think of it however you want to. Some people call it the Christ consciousness. Some people might call it Atman, et cetera. That's fine. Language always gets in the way when you start talking spirituality, right? But people have their own journey and path. But be you magnificently is you already are. That's the thing. It's not like I'm trying to get there. It's already there. And it's that inner magnificence, that light, that is that divine source that we have forgotten about. And it's trapped us into thinking, competition, comparison, judgment. I'm isolated. I'm all alone. Do you realize, that's the source of chronic disease, is isolation and loneliness, right? That is a cause of chronic disease, because your hormones in your bodies is not going to be the most harmonious out there circulating through your blood. So those are like the two ways of working with me. But right now, certainly directly, there's this medical piece, but then here is a more broader piece where a more people can, again, empower their own health.
And the website is?
My website is valenciaray.com, VALENCIARAY.com. And then the other website is literally under construction, is the wellwholewise.com.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And I look forward to following what's happening in 2022 as that Well, Whole, and Wise comes online. And we'll check back in with you in about a year and see how it's going.
Oh, that sounds exciting. That sounds good. Thank you so much for the interview.
It's a delight to see you again. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Valencia Ray is a medical doctor and functional medicine physician. She helps busy women overcome stress and burnout and stop annoying symptoms without scary drugs. She helps them to do things like lose weight, experience greater vitality, connection, and confidence. Her life's calling has been about assisting women on the journey of healing stress and burnout while building overall health through the integration of body, mind, and spirit, beginning with herself. The anti-aging benefits of her approaches address such common symptoms as low energy and fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, hair loss, weight gain, food cravings, digestive problems, prediabetes, sleep issues, thyroid conditions, hormonal and menopausal challenges, and struggles with confidence. She supports women to maintain radiant health and well-being so they can have the vitality, know-how, and confidence to thrive in life and relationships.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.